like to welcome you members to the first meeting of the Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh Committee. I hope this is the first of many successful meetings. If I can start the agenda, we've got apologies for absence and we've no apologies for this meeting. I turn to item number 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Logue, I think you have a transparency statement.
Yes, so just a transparency statement for item 10. I have a close family member involved in the Balmacar Community Trust, but as the item is just for noting and no decision is being made, I can stay in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest or transparency statements? No. Okay, I'm going to move on to item number 3. That's recess powers. The committee is invited to note that the recess powers granted by the council at its meeting on the 30th of June 2022 did not require to be exercised in relation to the business of the Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh Committee. Are you content to note? Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, and this is for the appointment of chair. And I'm inviting nominations for the post of chair of the Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh Committee.
Well, I saw the email that you sent, which is that wording is fine by me to propose. The trouble is I haven't got it in front of me now because I've got the agenda in front of me, but it's fine by me.
I think for transparency, I'll read out the motion that you suggested that you were going to put forward, Councillor Burt, and that is if you hold on one moment.
While I've got your agenda, I daren't go back.
Right, no, that's okay. I think you were going to move that the post of chair and vice chair be shared, and in this instance between Councillors Campbell and Craft, with each swapping roles for a 12-month period, and after 4 years the remaining term would be shared. Is that correct, Councillor Burt?
That's correct.
Have you got a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Okay. And is that carried by the remaining members of the committee?
It does.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there any agreement about which member will take place first, or would you prefer that I cut the cards to determine?
I think we'd agree that you would cut the cards.
Yeah, happy to cut the cards. Happy to cut the cards.
Okay, I'll do it in alphabetical order. So that means I'll be cutting the cards for Councillor Campbell first. Got the cards here. Just to indicate that aces will be high. Sorry, I seem to have a pack. It's a new pack, so excuse that. Okay, cutting the cards. That is 9 of diamonds.
9 of diamonds.
Councillor Campbell. Councillor Craft, I'm cutting the cards. 4 of hearts. So what that means, according to your motion, that Councillor Campbell is chairing the meeting for the first 12 months with Elizabeth Craft as vice chair, and then it will rotate in a 12-month period. That actually removes the next item, which is the appointment of vice chair, obviously. So I now invite Councillor Campbell to take the chair.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for that. I take over the meeting now, and we'll go into the police local committee performance report next.
I think Councillor Campbell, I think you were wanting to mention the recent incidences that have
yes. Could we please, first of all, have a 2-minute silence for the dreadful accident that happened in Lochalsh and Skye, and have a 2-minute silence, please. Hello? Hello there.
Thank you, Chair. That's 2 minutes
Hello.
up.
Hello. That ends our 2-minute silence. So now we go on to the next agenda on the committee papers, which is the Police Scotland Local Committee Performance Report, and given by our North Area Commander. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. First of all, introduce myself. I'm Richard Ross. I'm the Area Inspector in Dingwall. I'm standing in for Chief Inspector Scott MacDonald this morning to deliver the report, which I believe you'll all have a copy of the report. So I'll just pick out the sort of some relevant points. So I say this report relates to the time period 1st of April 2021 until 31st of March this year. We've also continued with the new style of report, and hopefully that is suiting everybody for the way that our statistics are laid out. In terms of statistics, the interpretation of these is key to what we do, ensuring we have the right officers in the right place to keep communities safe. We do compare data year on year and in terms of the previous 5 years, but we have to be mindful of the effect that COVID pandemic has had on some of these statistics and how that's going to play out over the next few years. As always, I'm happy to discuss any of the data should anybody wish further detail. At the moment, having come out of the COVID challenges, we're now facing issues with the cost of living and the impact that may have on our communities, including those who are also going to feel hardship. Our officers are continuing to work with partner agencies to protect vulnerable people within our communities. In terms of road traffic, throughout the period, we've maintained our presence on the roads, ensuring road traffic legislation is enforced, improving road safety and investigating collisions. I know that's a topic that's of particular interest to people. Especially with the noticeable increase in visitors to the Highlands, we've maintained presence on the road, and across the area we continue to engage with the visitor management groups to prevent and resolve any issues that arise. In terms of antisocial behaviour, there has been a slight increase in assaults as social distancing has been removed and all COVID restrictions lifted. Obviously, with licensed premises and events taking place this year, that is anticipated this would occur. I'm pleased to see that only 2 serious assaults have been recorded for the previous 12 months, which is a reduction from the previous period. In terms of frauds, we do continue to see frauds being reported to us. And this is obviously something that's come in over the last few years, particularly online and telephone type scams. We continue to try to engage with the public, put information out to try and prevent these. And we work with financial institutes to reinforce these messages around keeping money safe. You will note in the report that there's a significant increase in missing person inquiries from last year. Again, that's probably to be expected as people are out and about more, people moving about, and a factor in this is also repeated missing looked after children, which we work closely with our partner agencies to resolve. In terms of hate crime, figures remain low, with 1 recorded in the last 12 months, which was a reduction from previous years. In terms of hate crime, we continue to take a robust approach in relation to all hate crime incidents reported to us. We aim to support victims, encouraging them to report incidents to us and ensure that they're confident in the response they will get. Moving on to our priorities, so they remain as road safety and road crime, antisocial behaviour, violence and disorder, acquisitive crime, protecting vulnerable people, serious organised crime, terrorism and public order. I'll now go over the data that's on page 4 of the report, which is your particular area at a glance, and I'll cover some of the statistics for these. So in terms of road safety, overall road crime offences have increased against the 5-year average and increased against the last year to date. Mobile telephone offences, it's driving while using a mobile telephone, they've decreased against both the 5-year average and the last year to date. In terms of failure to insure against third-party risks, that has reduced against both 5-year and last year to date. For antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence, as we've seen in terms of overall antisocial behaviour in the area, we've seen a decrease against the 5-year average, and it's stayed the same in terms of the last year to date, so there's no change to figures. In terms of common assault, it's decreased against the 5-year average, but has increased in terms of last year. Compared to the same period last year, it's increased by 2 more crimes. I say that is anticipated that these type of incidents would increase as people were out and about more. In terms of serious assaults, that has decreased against both the 5-year and the last year to date figures. For acquisitive crime, overall acquisitive crime has reduced against the 5-year and the last year to date, which is pleasing to see. In terms of housebreaking, and specifically in relation to dwelling houses, that has decreased against the 5-year average and increased by 75% against the last year to date, so a significant reduction compared to the last year to date. For fraud offences, there has been an increase against the 5-year average, quite significant, a 66% increase, although we have seen a decrease in your area compared to last year to date. Though, as I said, there is a sort of national trend of online frauds being an issue. In terms of protecting vulnerable people, overall sexual crime has reduced in terms of both the 5-year and the last year to date. And the domestic related offences have also decreased in terms of the 5-year and the last year to date, as well as I've already commented on, there's been a decrease in hate crime for both the 5-year and last year to date. The priority of serious and organised crime, over the last reporting year, there was a decrease in drug supply offences against the 5-year average and also the last year to date. In terms of counter-terrorism and domestic extremism, we don't report on figures, but there is a section, and I won't read it out, there's a section from our local contest liaison officer in terms of the preventative work that is done, and should further advice be required or any training inputs, our local contest liaison officer can be contacted to arrange that. In terms of the priorities, the figures are laid out in the report for particular offences. They're there to read, but I'll maybe highlight some of the preventative work that's been done. So in terms of road safety, the number of fatalities has dropped by 1 in the last year. Drink driving offences increased, as has speeding offences. So that is probably to be expected with people as they out and about more over the last year. In terms of preventative work, we continue to pursue Operation Cedar, which is our operation to challenge, educate, detect and reduce offences on the road. Our road policing colleagues also are progressing Driver Engagement North, which is a preventative campaign in relation to driver safety, and Operation Close Pass in relation to cycle safety regularly takes place. In terms of the North Coast 500 and visitor management, road policing have had plans in place for extensive patrols of the NC 500 route in terms of preventing and detecting offences, and we continue to work with the various visitor management groups across the area. In terms of antisocial behaviour, as I've gone over the figures already in terms of that, what I would highlight is that we're currently in the middle of an 18-month pilot in terms of a harm prevention officer who is based in Police Headquarters in Inverness. This is a fully funded post by NHS Highland via the Highlands Alcohol and Drug Partnership. And this is with the aim of identifying those most at risk of harm by whether that be alcohol or drug misuse, and signposting them to our partners for preventative work. They're also looking to tackle cuckooing and county line activity that affects our communities. So that's ongoing. It's an 18-month pilot, and hopefully that will continue. In terms of stop and search, you'll see from the report the number of searches has dropped over the period, but the number of positive searches has stayed relatively static. Moving on to acquisitive crime, as I've covered the figures there in terms of fraud and housebreaking. Theft by shoplifting increased by 1 over the time period, and motor vehicle crime reduced by 3 over the last year. In terms of fraud, as I've mentioned, that is an ongoing issue, and that's not just to our area, that's a national issue. The banking protocol is a scheme with the financial institutes, which we have promoted and work closely with institutes to identify those who may be potential victims of crime and to proactively engage with them. That's had a number of successful outcomes in the area over the last year. Attached to this report, there is a guide to keeping safer together in your community, and I'd encourage councillors to take time to read that and to try and get some of that messaging out to the community if we can. So yeah, I've covered the statistics for protecting vulnerable people. There is a section in your report which is from our Chief Inspector and the Public Protection Unit. I don't propose reading that out, it's there for reading. Did mention missing persons. There has been an increase over the last year, and I say as lockdown is eased and people are out and about more, that would be anticipated that it would rise. What I will say is that the statistics that are there are not singular to your area. They are for the N division area, for the command area. So it's a wider than just your area alone. So if, in terms of serious and organised crime, I've covered the statistics there, but in terms of county lines activity, we continue to target that where it occurs within the division, and we do have officers dedicated to that work, and I've covered the harm prevention officer. I don't propose to go through the statistics that are laid out at the back of the report, But I'm now happy to take questions from councillors if there's anything they would like to ask me in relation to the report.
Thank you very much for your very thorough report, and I'm pleased to see you've got a new appointment for the drug and alcohol, and you're connecting up with the other agencies, sharing your information. So thanks for that. I'll open it up to the members for any questions. Thank you. Hello,
Chair, Councillor Craft has her hand up.
Councillor Craft.
Hello, yeah, thanks for that really detailed report. Probably observations more than questions. So the general downward trend in a lot of the statistics that you showed, is that kind of replicated across the country due to COVID? And is there a possibility, there was a lot of concern during COVID about maybe hidden domestic crimes? Have you any concern that maybe some things weren't reported? So that was the first thing. And the two things I just wanted to comment on was really good to hear that you're linking into the visitor management groups. That's something that comes up for all of us in the North Coast 500 area. Lots of concern about the speeding traffic around the roads. So, you know, we can give them the assurance that you are on it, and we will bring back any reports locally to yourselves of any kind of hotspots. And lastly, just personally delighted about the harm prevention post. I think that's a fantastic and much needed post.
Thank you. Any other member, you'll have to tell me, Willie.
No other hands at present, Chair.
Well, if there's no other hands up, do we agree the recommendation? And thank the Constable for coming along this morning to give us a very detailed report. Thank you. Now we'll go on to the next agenda, which is the nomination for somebody for Westeros Biosphere Limited. Can we have a nomination, please? Willie, you have to help me because I can't see the hands.
Chair, the first item under number 7 is the Lochalsh Local Access Forum.
Yeah, the social.
Yeah.
Could we have nominations for the Skye and Lochalsh Access Forum?
Councillor Logue has his hand up.
Councillor Logue.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Campbell.
Do we have to get a seconder, Willie?
Seconder required.
I'm happy to second that.
Right, thank you, Liz. So that's agreed that Ms Campbell goes as a member to Skye and Lochalsh Access Forum. Now we have nomination for Westeros Biosphere.
Chair, we're just looking to ratify Councillor Craft's appointment.
I'll nominate Councillor Craft or seconder, whatever's necessary. Because I can't see the hands.
Councillor Burt, you're on mute.
Yes, I'll second that. Yes.
Okay, Chair, that's you got your.
Now we go on to item 8, the winter service plan. The committee is invited to approve the winter service plan for 2023 and note that COVID-19 and driver's hours regulations will potentially have an impact on the winter service provided.
Chair, we have Ian Moncrief here to present the report.
Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. Well, as it's been introduced, this is the winter treatment policy, the winter treatment plan for Wester, Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh. Across the Highland Council, we try to maintain the same standards of treatment across all the areas. So we have a winter treatment policy which is approved at HQ committee. And this means that we have the same, if you like, level of treatment and the same target times across the whole of the Highland Council. However, within each area, we also have the area winter plan, and this is what this report sets out. This means that this explains how we deliver the winter maintenance, and it requires the committee approval. To give you a brief summary, in terms of winter routes, Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh has just short of 800 kilometres of roads, and we can't treat everything all at the same time. So we've established a system of priorities. Primary routes are the strategic roads, typically A's, maybe some B's, and that accounts for something like 33% of the road network.
Mm-hmm.
Secondary routes are maybe where we have a service or a school bus road, or maybe there's maybe lesser important than a primary route, but they're still kind of important routes, and that's coming in at 28%. And then all other routes are lumped together, and that's just the remainder of routes at 39%. So it's roughly a third, a third, and a third. In terms of treatment, typically treatment would be 10 grams of salt per square metre for a frost, increasing to 20 grams for ice, and for heavy snow, it would be 40 grams, although this may be split into multiple runs. In terms of treatment times, Mondays to Fridays, primaries we aim to treat by 8:30, secondaries by 9 o'clock, and others as resources permit. For the weekend routes, primaries by 8:30 and secondary and others as resources permit. In terms of how we manage this, Ross and Cromarty, as you well know, is an exceedingly large area. So we've split this into two groups, the East and the West group. And Wester Ross, Strathpeffer, Lochalsh, that covers the whole of the West group. And to give you an idea of how we actually manage it, at noon each day, the duty officer checks the forecast and makes the decision to either treat all or some of the routes, and also what level of treatment. For instance, it might be 20 grams with blades fitted for snow. This is passed to the foremen and depots who organise drivers and gritters. We also undertake evening treatment that night and in the morning the next day as appropriate, but we receive a forecast update in the evening and in the morning, which is used to either confirm or amend the actions. In addition to the forecast, we also have Isolar Sensors built into our roads at strategic locations that record information such as temperature, presence of salt, and moisture. In the morning, if the temperatures rise quicker than expected, the gritters can be recalled to the depot, because if the salt melts, we're only really wasting salt just to go around and treat roads. Both of the East and the West group have their own duty officer, and they are on effectively 24/7. Across Wester Ross, Strathpeffer, Lochalsh, the winter maintenance is delivered from a range of depots. These are contained in the committee paper, and I won't read them out to you a bit, as I'm sure you're well aware of them, but it ranges from Acklety in the north through to Glenelg in the south, and as far east as Silverbridge. And across the area, we've got 15 gritters. So I hope this gives you a wee summary of our winter operations, and ask that members approve the winter service plan for the area. I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Any questions, members? Willie, you have to help me with hands.
No hands at present, Chair.
No hands. So are the members,
Councillor Burt has his hand up.
Councillor Burt?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very interesting and comprehensive report. I'm just interested to know, thinking of trends on climate change, has the requirement for winter treatment changed over the last decade, year by year? I would like to think that maybe we're requiring less and less winter treatment, but is that the case or not?
I would probably say that it makes the decision-making process harder. If we cast our minds back to the maybe the 20, 30 years ago, we used to have a very definite winter. There was a lot of snow, a lot of ice and frost. But now we find that as the temperatures have increased, even slightly, what we're finding now is that we don't have that black and white approach. We're either gritting or we're not gritting. My duty officers now have to sort of like look at the shades of grey, and they'll maybe see, well, there might be a touch of frost scheduled for 5 o'clock in the morning, or forecast for 5 o'clock in the morning. But come 6:30, the forecasts we get are always on the pessimistic side. So just in order to prevent accidents. So the forecasters have to make a decision based on the information they get, and that's not black and white anymore, because the temperatures are basically higher. They're hovering around zero quite often. And then when that information arrives at my duty officer, they have to make that decision as well. Now, what we tend to do is, if in doubt, we tend to treat the roads, because if somebody has an accident, you could be potentially looking at a loss of life. Certainly, you know, it wouldn't be uncommon to have some sort of injury if you spun off the road. And the implications that has both on the actual road user, their families, plus the fact that we may well end up in court. It is a very heavy responsibility on my duty officer to get that decision right.
Yes, so, I quite see that.
As what we tend to do is, if we're in doubt, we'll put the gritters out. But we monitor well, in the morning we would get the morning forecast, and that might have more accurate data. The temperatures may have risen up overnight, so the duty officer can cancel the action, or if the action does go ahead, then usually you're looking at about a 3-hour gritting run, and maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours into that gritting run, some of the temperatures may have come up on the actual road surfaces, and we can see that in real time through our sensors. So we can say, well, the Acklety Buoy run, for instance, that can be cancelled. Gritter can be returned to its depot because the temperature is above zero. Whereas maybe on the Bialach or the Mamratigan routes, it's a high level route. Temperatures are still very cold in the plateau. So we're going to continue with that. And that gives my duty officers a bit of real-time data to make that decision.
Yes, thank you very much. I can quite see the increasing difficulty and the reasons for that. Yes.
Thank you, Chris.
Councillor Craft has her hand up, and then
Councillor Craft.
Yeah, so thanks for that report. That was really informative and interesting. One question. So we were informed that due to global conditions, the Ukraine war, that you had to change the procurement supplier for the emulsion that you were using, and that the emulsion that you're now getting is not so conducive to the Scottish climate. That's in general. Is that going to have any additional impact in winter?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I would like to speak with I'd like to speak authoritatively on this. Unfortunately, I can't. Surface dressing is a very volatile operation. It's a very cheap operation. Typically, we can treat a road in the region of maybe about £4.60 per square metre compared to £25 a square metre if we lay new tar. The reason we surface dress is that it protects the road surface and it adds extra skid resistance. The operation basically is we have an emulsion, which is a mix of bitumen and water, which is turned into an emulsion, is sprayed onto the road, we spread the chips, we then roll them in. The emulsion acts effectively as a glue. In the last few years, we've been using an emulsion from a supplier called Ninus. That emulsion has proven to be very effective for the conditions that we face. We only surface dress from about June through to maybe certainly no later than the end of September, and quite often before then. It's very weather dependent. If it rains, we cancel it. We just have to defer that operation until the weather improves. But you get different suppliers of emulsion, and those different suppliers, the product's not always the same. It meets the same standard, but some suppliers produce a better product than others. Ninus, unfortunately, took both the bitumen and the emulsifiers they use to turn it into an emulsion from Ukraine or Russia. I'm not entirely sure which one's which. I think the emulsifiers came from Ukraine. I think the bitumen came from Russia. Clearly, the embargo on Russian oil and the war in Ukraine has hit their operations, and they were unable to supply us with their usual product. As a result, we then had to look for alternative suppliers, and we returned to a supplier we've used many times in the past, and that's the emulsion that we've been using this summer. That emulsion, although it meets the standard, is less robust than Ninus. What you'll tend to see is that we've used very long surface dressing sites. I personally don't put forward any surface dressing sites less than 1 kilometre. I much prefer the 5 kilometre to 10 kilometre surface dressing sites. That provides efficiency in operation, but crucially, it allows us to spend longer on that road in aftercare, where we're rolling the chips in, we're sweeping them, and we're not having to hop from site to site to site. And if by having fewer sites but longer, we have the same tonnage that maybe other areas put down, but it gives us longer on the aftercare. And critically, the amount of aftercare you put onto the road using the emulsion that we do have is critical to its success. What you will find is that after winter, no matter what emulsion you use, after winter you tend to see whether it's been a complete success or a partial success, as some of the chips will lift after the winter frost. And it's a question as to how well the current supplier compares to Ninus. I'm hoping that we can return to Ninus for next summer. So I can't answer your question directly, Councillor Craft, but I hope that gives some of the background to the problems that we've been facing.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Anybody else?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Logue.
Logue?
Yes, thank you. Just one small question. I was interested to read about the precautionary treatment carried out the previous evening. I was wondering if you could give a bit more information on that and how effective it tends to be to do precautionary treatment on the previous evening.
Certainly. The public don't just travel during the daylight hours on the roads. I mean, and clearly we have a duty to try to protect the public. Under the Road Scotland Act, it simply says that we have a duty to maintain the roads, to keep them free of ice and snow, but it doesn't say how we do that, or it doesn't say over what period. That's where the winter treatment policy in HQ establishes that level of treatment. What we tend to do is that the winter treatment, the precautionary treatment in the evenings, they tend to be they tend to focus on they do focus on the A-class roads, the strategic routes. We don't treat the secondary routes. We don't treat the other routes. We tend to leave at 6 o'clock in the evening, and we don't tend to get back until the 9:30 at night. Quite often, what you'll find is that, with the exception of maybe the core winter months, you'll find that on each side of winter, you'll find that you'll get frost, maybe in the morning and overnight, and temperatures then rise during the actual day. So the winter treatment, not only does it put down some salt on your strategic routes, which means that you may not have to treat them in the morning, therefore saving time. It also gives the overnight motorists, who are typically going to be using the strategic routes, a bit more comfort because the roads are treated. The problem is that again, this is all based on a forecast, and the forecast we get at noon that day, so the evening treatment starts 6 hours after that. We do get an evening forecast update, and we do have our Isolar sensors. The sensors are built into the road network. They have a telephone chip in them, and they record things such as the silt level content. You quite often see them, they're a small metal plate, and it will record the chemical state on that small plate. That gives an indication whether you've got, or how much salt is sitting on the road surface. And that information, coupled with the temperature of the road surface, gives my duty officers the ability to have a better forecast as to whether they're going to need evening treatment or not. Essentially, it's as you go into the core winter months, you'll quite often see in some routes, some sheltered glens, the temperature never gets above 0 for several days at a time. And that's when the evening treatment really comes into its own. If we get overnight snow, it's much better to have a layer of salt down on the road the evening before. That all helps in delivering the service the following day.
Thank you, Ian. Is it still the case, Ian, that you don't you don't go out with a plough after 9 o'clock at night?
We don't have any treatment typically after 9 o'clock at night, Councillor Campbell.
No, as I know to my cost, I went to a community council in Glenelg, and it was okay before the community council meeting, but when it finished, I couldn't get back over the hill. So I phoned the local boy. I phoned the boys to see if they could take the plough out so I get over the hill, as I had planning next day. But I was told after 9 o'clock, the plough doesn't go out, your policy. Good night, Councillor Campbell.
I apologise for that, Councillor Campbell. You know, the problem we're facing is that we have to comply with drivers' hours. And just now, we're allowed to run winter operations on what's called the GB domestic driver regulations, which effectively says we can have 10 hours driving and 11 hours work in any day. But when we look at the fact that the number of men, the number of depots, the geographical diversity of Ward 5, we see that there's a problem in delivering that service past 9 o'clock, because we'll exceed either the working hours or the driving hours. And that is becoming more of an issue now as the GB domestic hours are being tightened up.
I understand, Ian. And very kind Highland hospitality. I had a wonderful bed and breakfast in Glenelg. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you very much. Do the members approve the reports, or any more questions? The agree recommendation from Ian?
I'm happy to approve.
Approved.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian.
Okay, thanks very much, councillors. Bye then.
Thank you. Now we're into the Highland Coastal Communities Fund assessment of application. The committee is invited to consider the application presented for funding and agree whether to approve, defer or reject the application. An approval of funding should detail the amount approved and outline any conditions of funding that members wish to attach to the approval. Over and above the required technical conditions, a deferral would allow an applicant to resubmit the current application at a future date with update information. A rejection would mean that the application will not proceed, and any future application to the firm should be brought forward initially as a new expression of interest. So who do we have presented in this?
Yes, Chair, we have Fiona Cameron and Marianne Gray.
Thank you. Fiona, just proceed, and Marianne.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So yes, we've just got one application in front of you for a decision today, looking for £20,148 of funding from the Coastal Communities Fund, and that's towards total project costs of £25,148. And essentially, it's quite a straightforward project. It's just funding for the repair and refurbishment of the conveniences at Achiltabui, which I think members are aware of the project being in development. So we have presented you with a technical assessment today and also a RAG summary to help you with your decision. I would just remind members that that RAG summary is presented as a guide, and where anything is not marked green in the summary, it generally indicates that there's some level of concern there that we would look to address with a condition. It doesn't mean that there's any eligibility issues. In actual fact, in this case, the project has almost all green in the RAG assessment, suggesting it's a very well planned project, well developed and properly thought out. The only one we've marked as amber is match funding, and that's down to the fact that although we've been given verbal assurance that the £5,000 match funding is there, we would need to have formal confirmation of that before the project could start. The only other thing I'd probably want to draw members' attention to is the issue we've picked up on around the applicant for the project. So the project is presented today with the applicant as the Community Council, but it's very much a partnership project that's been brought forward in development with Highland Council and with the Community Council. And my understanding is that as Highland Council own the facility, they are also going to be the organisation that does the procurement and lets the contract for the work. So the issue I'm raising really is just a pragmatic issue around the applicant so that we can minimise the bureaucracy in the project. It may be more sensible for Highland Council to act as the applicant in partnership with the Community Council. But as I say, that's something we would put into the offer of grant as a condition or try and resolve prior to awarding the offer of grant. It's not a barrier to members approving the project today. So I'm just going to keep that quite brief, and I'm happy and also Marianne's here who did the assessment. We're happy to answer any questions that members might have on the project. And I'd just probably remind you about that we would only be able to answer questions based on the information the applicant has given us. So if there was something you needed to know that was in a bit more detail, we may need to go back to the applicant to check that. But hopefully we would be able to answer any questions you've got. And I just welcome any comments or questions from members.
Any questions from members on this application?
Chair, Councillor Craft has her hand up.
Councillor Craft.
Yeah, this is a project that I'm just delighted to see, and I know that the conveniences have been community run. if you're ever down, Coyach, Achelty excellent facilities. And I believe, having been at the last community council, that they're actually bringing in quite a lot in donations from very grateful users. It's an area as well that has been, for an area of a small population and quite rural, well, it's all very rural, remote, just with a single track road, it has been hit really quite heavily by the recent impact we've had with the visitors, and that's evidenced in the visitor impact report. So this is an absolutely essential facility that is already being very well run. My understanding, and just what I wanted clarification on, is I understand that the refurbishment hopefully would also make the toilet slightly more accessible. Is that correct?
I believe so. I think the applicant has stated that in the application. I'm not sure if that's something Marianne would know a bit more about, but certainly anything they would do would be compliant. I think what they're talking about is installing a grab rail into the disability toilet, which I assume doesn't exist at the moment. And that toilet would also be accessible then through a radar key. So there is an intention to make sure that the facility is accessible. I don't know if you'd want to add anything to that, Marianne.
No, that's it. That's correct.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other questions, members? If not, do we agree this recommendation for approval, pending they get the extra 5,000 from elsewhere?
Yes, certainly.
Well, that's us agreeing there.
Yes, I'm happy.
Recommendation. Thank
Yep.
you. Now, item 10, we've got a note of all the discretionary grants which we've approved. Do you have any comments on any of them, members? We've already approved them. No comments?
No, all fine.
Oh, well, that's fine. We've approved all those grants. Thank you. And item number 11, the circulated for noting minutes of meeting of the Westeros, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh committee held on the 9th of February 2022 and the 7th of March 2022, which were approved by the council on the 10th of March 2022. It's noted. So this ends today's meeting of Westeros, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh committee, area committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.